Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
I mean, sometimes you get lucky with how much uh, how good the gas mileage is actually being. So, hey, I can't complain. I didn't run out of gas. I didn't get stranded on the side of the road. I was able to get done what I needed to. So, hey.
Did you have to dip into the reserve?
Well, when the light comes on, that is, you're like, hey, you're less than a gallon left. You might want to stop for gas soon. But, when you're getting almost 50 miles per gallon, you got a little bit of time. I just didn't realize how close I was. Because it was about 35, almost 40 miles between when the light came on, and I was able to go to my stop and then backtrack a bit to the gas station. Yeah, it's the part that sucks when you have to go pick up a new card for your account because somehow someone got the numbers and decided to try to charge just shy of $800 worth of tolls to it. Yeah, that was a fun Friday and Saturday morning for me. How has it been for you guys?
Better than that.
Yes, we are having a fun one, and
I don't know if I call this topic fun.
Oh, well, we are doing a bit of a retake. The actual topic we're going to start with does have some enjoyable parts to it. It's just, oh boy, I am surprised at the number of people that missed one part of it, though.
One.
Well,
A section, maybe.
The initial premise, people did forget because for those who are unaware, Dave Cullen, the Dave Cullen Show, actually does some good content and commentary concerning the Star Trek universe and everything there. But Dave, that last video you did, some people would not be off base by saying, "Thank you, Dave. You just justified the forced relocation of the Native Americans by the United States government back in the 1800s.
I see nothing wrong with that. Just see where it got you. Oh, wait.
Florida man, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's... Well, it does... and here's the thing. Okay, so, Jay, let's go ahead and start the screen share portion of that so people can get a better idea of what it was. Because Dave decided to take a look back at the movie Star Trek Insurrection. And he admitted that, yeah, Star Trek First Contact was a great movie for TNG. But then they followed it up with Insurrection, and he came up with some ways to try to improve the movie, change the story in a way that would have made the movie better. Which I will say right now, for the most part, I agree with him.
Yeah, I would agree too.
But there's a problem with his initial premise that was actually, as stated when we reviewed the movie Nemesis, we brought it up then too. There is a moral question that came up in an episode of TNG that they brought back around in Nemesis. And that has to do with...
Insurrection.
Insurrection. Oh, yeah, Insurrection. Sorry. You have the moral quandary of when you forcibly relocate a people what conditions make it allowable? Under what circumstances can you justify it and be okay with it from a moral standpoint?
When it's something where immediate harm can come to them, and it's just something where you're not allowed to tell them outright, but you still need to somehow save them if you're actually able to.
And that set of circumstances I would agree with. But that's not the circumstances we were dealing with in Insurrection. So let's go ahead and press play for a moment. And let's let Dave set up the scenario from his point of view.
Jared?
In the Star Trek The Next
Yep.
Generation film series,
Turn on
the
the closed
exceptional
captions
Star
so
Trek
people
First
can read it as
Contact
well.
from
Well, you don't like the Irish accent?
I don't mind it. It's just one of those things. It's way easier to keep track of it if you have the captions on as well. And then we can pause it and
1996
still see what
was
he's
followed
saying.
up by the utterly mediocre Star Trek Insurrection in 1998. Rather than make another dark, high-octane action-adventure film with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, the producers instead decided to go in a radically different direction. A light-hearted, family-friendly story.
Is it really so radically different when that was the majority of Star Trek TNG?
Not
Well, if you-
really.
When you compare it to just First Contact by itself, yes, it is. But if you take a look at the entire TNG era and the first two movies, it's more lighthearted than it is and family friendly than it is the dark one-off that we get in First Contact as far as the movies, and then a handful of darker episodes in late TNG.
Yeah, I would easily compare it to the majority of episodes in TNG and even TOS, where it was basically a long-form episode. So not really a radical departure there, Dave, but with that short scope that is comparing it to, yeah, it was radically different than First Contact. I would say that First Contact was the radical departure, not Insurrection.
I would agree. All right.
About a poor, defenseless group of 600 humanoids called the Baku, who are living in a pre-industrial society on a tranquil, idyllic planet in peace and harmony, having to face the threat of being moved from their home by the military might of the Federation and their new allies, the Sona.
That's Sona, not Sauna.
Yeah, the spelling of the closed captions tends to be intriguing.
Well,
Now-
sometimes they might actually need a sauna too.
Well, Worf definitely did, with his gorch. Got to clean those pores out.
It's natural musk.
The use of the military might of the Federation and their new allies, the Sona, is one of the points that I have issue with this is he doesn't talk about the fact that the Sona are not exactly the best allies to have in the first place. If you remember going back into watching the movie, the Sona use weapons that have been banned by the Khitomer Accords. So why are they even allied with the Federation?
Well, and not just that, we're coming up on the tail end, latter portions of the Dominion War era, too. The Sona used to be allies of the Dominion because they were able to help with the manufacture of Ketracel White.
Yep, that was the other part I was going to bring up.
So not only do you have, these guys go against our conventions on the hardware side, they were straight up allied with the enemies up until who knows how recently.
Okay.
The Enterprise crew have to defy the orders of the Federation and prevent the forced relocation of the Baku. The reason the Baku planet is so important to the Federation is because it's essentially the site of a kind of fountain of youth. Some metaphasic radiation in the planet's rings helps to keep the Baku people young and immortal. In fact, some of them are 300 years old. And so the Sona have partnered with the Federation to help them extract the radiation in order to produce a new medical science that could end disease and eventually greatly extend lifespans. But the procedure would leave the planet uninhabitable for generations.
And that requires the relocation of the people? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm wondering in this case, though, how was it that they were actually supposed to gather it?
Well, as it was loosely explained in the movie, the probe, the collector that the Sona had built would actually inject a device like a probe into the ring system, which is the source of the radiation, the metaphasic radiation that they're talking about, to cause a cascade reaction, which the collector would then absorb that increased output and collect it, almost like putting an agent into a solution that is meant to separate things out, and then you filter out and strain out only the bits that you want.
With that, though, what would actually keep them from staying on the planet? They're only a really small settlement.
Well, no. The rings go the entirety, obviously go around the entirety of the planet, and what they explained is that during that reaction, there would be an increase of a type of radiation that is supremely harmful to humanoid life, which is why when they had the Sona and some of the Federation team that went with Picard to the surface in an unshielded cargo bay, they were like, wait, they're at risk. So what? There was an actual threat to the survivability of people as that process was going on. Think not quite to the extent that they went with in Nemesis and the Thalaron radiation that they used there, but pretty damn close.
With that, though, what would stop them from setting up a shield to, well, shield them? As mentioned, it's just a small settlement.
Laziness.
Plot armor.
Oh, plus the whole... this is where the relocation aspect harkens back to the episode in season 7? End of
Who
6?
watches the Watchers?
Well, not Who Watches the Watchers. The one where Wesley ends up disappearing with the Traveler again.
Right. That's the one with... yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, where in that episode, Picard was willing to follow the orders of the Federation Council to forcibly relocate these, the settlers who, a little too on point, quite literally, were Native American descendants, similar to Chakotay's family.
Mm-hmm. You don't say.
And it took Wesley pointing out the moral quandary to Picard for him to decide, no, we shouldn't actually do this. And that was actually one of the things on the writing that I gave it credit to, that it was harkening back to that episode, and Picard from the beginning was like, whoa, wait, you're doing what?
Journey's End is the episode you're looking for.
Yeah.
What's even funnier is scrolling through IMDb, looking at it. There's also the episode Homeward with Worf's brother wanting to evacuate a race of people from a planet that's that's basically being killed by these storms, and he wants to use the holodeck to make it look like they're traveling to another part of their planet, when in actuality they're being transferred to a entirely different planet.
That just happened to be close enough they could get to it in a few days. That just happened to be damn near a copy of the planet that they were leaving.
Yeah.
But even then, we can go to another episode where there is actually true impending danger, and they weren't really supposed to do shit. Pen pals.
Oh, way back in season 1?
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that. But pen pals, okay. So the planet is getting slightly toasty. What do? Oh, we can't do shit. I mean, the primitives. This is just part of the natural progression.
Not just they are primitive, and as part of the natural progression, they haven't asked for help. There is that caveat, and that was the linchpin that Picard used to justify the violation of the Prime Directive. Is there is this girl that Data had been talking to, who quite literally asked for help.
Granted, she thought she was talking to somebody on her planet, not realizing she was talking to somebody in the space, but...
Well, what does actually constitute in that case calling for help? Because if someone just screams to the fucking sky, help us, or does it have to be directed towards the Enterprise?
The way I understood it is it has to be directed, as in they have knowledge of your existence, which is where that whole personal communication and calling for Data to help them directly is probably where that it moved across that line that's somewhere in the middle of that gray area. But even then, in that episode, they brought her aboard, they medically treated her, but at the same time, they altered her memory.
Yeah, as much as they can. Davros, you're just going to have to get closer instead.
Yeah, careful, you don't want him too close. He gets a little handsy.
Yeah, I already saw the picture. I'm not fond of that. Not fond of that at all.
So shall we continue on now?
Let's let him get to the premise that...
So that's why it must be evacuated. So the basic premise is, look at these poor, unfortunate, simple Baku. They're just trying to live in peace on this wonderful planet, this beautiful homeworld. How could anyone possibly think of moving them? What gives the Federation and the Sona the right to do such a terrible thing? The problem is that once you scratch beneath this extremely shallow, surface-level narrative, the entire story basically makes very little sense, and the arguments in defense of the Baku completely break down. First of all, the planet is in Federation space, which means it belongs to the Federation.
That's a bit of an issue there.
There is an issue there, which let's let him get the entirety of this argument out before we throw down the education.
This is very important. Many years ago, film reviewer Confused Matthew made a very interesting analogy when critiquing a major plot hole in this film, and it went something along the lines of the following. Imagine, if you will, that you own many acres of farmland, and you find out that some people have started trespassing on your property. They're squatting, they're living there without your consent, and they've now begun stealing all of your corn to feed themselves. Well, the property and all of the crops belong to you, so you are well within your rights to kick them off your land, especially when you want to feed way more people than just 600. Yes, there's only 600 Baku, and you want to feed, say, thousands of people. The Baku want to keep all the metaphasic radiation, which they don't own, all to themselves. How is that fair? That's incredibly selfish, especially when the Federation want to use the metaphasic radiation to improve the lives of billions of people. Secondly, the Baku...
Would either of you two like to start?
It's where to begin with all of that.
Well, let's start with that farm analogy and comparing it to the Federation.
The Federation doesn't own planets like that, just in the same way that you own a farm.
Oh,
They're more, what's the word? Not keepers per se. It's under their jurisdiction when it's something that's actually Federation matters. But they don't own the planets.
the Federation is a lot like the UN or the European Union. You have a bunch of sovereign states that all get together as part of one larger coalition. So no, the Federation does not own any planet, not even Earth. Every planet has their own government and their own rights and responsibilities to the planet themselves. And even goes further in about the amount of time that the Baku have been there. Say you go with just the oldest person that was there, of 300 years of age. The Federation wasn't even 300 years old at the time of that movie. The Baku got to the planet before the Federation was even a thing.
Yeah, so there's some issues going on there.
Just so you have a reference, this is one map that shows where the briar patch is, and then there's another one that has a more zoomed in but not quite the same location.
You'll just blame perspective.
No, I blame for perspective on this one. So they're saying that it was part of the Iconian area of the Federation space. So blue is obviously the United Federation of Planets.
Ah, over by the Breen and Ferengi.
Yep.
But and even earlier, the whole thing of utilizing the military might of Starfleet. There was only one Federation ship that even showed up, and it was the Enterprise. And the reason for that they gave was the extensive modifications that would be required just to go into the Briar Patch.
Well, even though he doesn't touch on it, the holodeck ship is actually a Federation technology, mixed with the cloaking technology of other species.
But you wouldn't call the availability and use of that ship leveraging the military might of the entire Federation.
Oh, I agree with you on that.
But even going after this, we're talking about the whole, oh yeah, people coming into your land, squatting on your land. As far as I'm aware, there's actually a fair deal of movement on the planets. Just from everywhere, essentially. As long as it isn't something that breaks the military and trade treaties.
Yeah. Or how about this? Once you've recognized the actual knowledge level of these people and what was going on, introduce yourselves, start a dialogue, and maybe have that be a therapeutic spot. You know, kind of like what I mentioned before with the whole issue in Picard with Riker and Troy's son, that they just let suffer the disease instead of, oh, I don't know, maybe going back to this planet?
Oh, come on now. You gotta have a reason for them to be so sad and depressed in the wonderful world of the Federation.
To be honest, look at the Federation, there's a fuck ton of different reasons to be sad and depressed.
Yeah, Synthahol.
Well, that, and sure, you have replicators, but it's replicator food. You have pretty much this whole thing now with so much more exploration, etc. But it also seems like you're actually more expected to, if someone dies during the exploration, or anything like that, or just fucking dies in general, oh, well, I guess it was their time. They seem so fucking subdued when it comes to actual tragedies in life otherwise.
Yep.
I just feel like the analogy here, it could actually be accurate if it wasn't used in this scenario in particular.
Yeah, and that there are other circumstances that you could come up with where they could use that analogy and be accurate, but it wasn't this one. And to me, it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Federation is, how it's set up, and what the actual purpose of that subplot to the story was. Plus, I still say Insurrection should have been the end of the TNG era movies. Let Picard retire there.
Yep.
But no, we had to get one more movie out of
Well,
him.
he had to prove that he was taking Kirk's advice to not let them force you out of the chair.
But he wouldn't have been forced out. It would have been his choice. I mean, he even commented about how much leave he had available to him, and that he may just have a reason to finally take it.
I know. All right, shall we continue on with the second premise?
Yep.
I think so.
Who are not indigenous to the planet. They came from a different planet and were once a highly advanced civilization with warp technology. This is also important as it completely undermines another aspect of the story and the central argument of the movie. The Federation, under their prime directive, has taken great steps to conceal their presence from the Baku, treating them like a primitive, simple people. They used invisible suits, holographic duck blinds. They intended to recreate the entire Baku village in a giant holodeck that has a cloaking device. But why did the Federation bother going to such lengths when A, they own the planet, and B, they knew the Baku were a warp-capable species?
Pause
Why
it.
the deception?
A, no they don't. B, no they didn't.
If you watch the beginning of Insurrection, nowhere does the conversations between Dowry and Rawafu mention that they're aware that the Baku are advanced or warp capable, which is why the Federation told them, the Sona, we have to go in with the holographic duck blind and everything like that in order to do this, to verify certain things.
And not just that, Dougherty's conversation with Picard, he straight up referred to them as a primitive, peaceful people.
Mm-hmm. And then Data went all nuts, and I can't imagine why Data would go all nuts.
He figured out what was up, and then basic
Pew, pew.
survival subroutines kicked in when he got damaged.
Pew pew. But yeah, just because they are a people that decide that had capability to use warp travel, go to another planet and settle down to not be so reliant on technology, doesn't mean that they can't become the indigenous people of an area. I love that this whole premise of this is that they're not indigenous. If you were to use this argument throughout the history of human migration, the only continent we should be able to populate as human beings is Africa.
Yeah.
So that means the Native Americans don't own their right to claim that they're the indigenous people here of the Americas, which I don't agree with, or I don't support that idea. I'm just using his logic here.
With that, though, do you really want to use that one? Since the current natives in the US, or in America, or the Americas rather,
Yeah.
got there and killed the people who were there before them, who migrated there before them.
I'm just
There's
saying.
several groups of people who've come to America,
Oh, I know.
and the one after slaughtered the one before.
I'm just using it as an example. I mean, like even using the Polynesian peoples. They don't have a right to claim half the islands that they claim as, their ancestry. Just because they migrated to these places and nobody was living there at the time.
Yeah, tell a Maori that they can't actually claim their heritage as their heritage.
Or
Just make
Hawaiian
sure
or
you do it from a
Samoan.
distance.
Do you think Dave's reasoning for this is to be controversial to get a conversation going, or do you think it was just a intellectual oversight on his part?
I think it's an intellectual oversight because he liked the way that this confused Matthew or Matt broke down the video or broke down the movie, because to those that listen to this and don't pick up on these little cues, it makes complete sense in what he's saying. If you're not paying attention and listening to what he's arguing, is plot holes basically for the movie, you would, if you didn't understand like some historical context to migration patterns and even the US's bad history of, in Canada's history, treating the indigenous people, the First Nations people, Native Americans, American Indians, etc. Whatever you want, whatever term you want to use, you understand that this is not an okay thing to just forcibly remove somebody just because you quote unquote own the property.
Yeah,
I mean, just look at the Trail of Tears.
No, and that's exactly where I went when I heard that. I was like, whoa. You just gave the justification that makes this event from U.S. history okay by your book, which I don't agree with.
I will give him some leeway, though. I do not know when he last actually watched the movie. And if it's one of those things, this is how I remember it, and after that, just getting a quick look through it without actually watching the entire movie.
That is a plausibility. Shall we continue on?
Hang on. Dora is wondering what the Trail of Tears is. Real quick, it was the forced relocation of a half dozen Native American tribes from the southeastern area of the United States to what is now Oklahoma against their will. At the end of the Seminole Wars, where there was actual armed conflict between the federal U.S. government and these native tribes.
And part of the issue was that we were pulling them out of Florida, which we didn't quite own yet. We hadn't negotiated with Spain to get Florida yet at that point.
Yeah, we were in progress of it. Part of it was Spain was willing to give it to us if we got rid of that problem. And then you had, well, if we're going to do that with the Seminole, let's look at these other tribes in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama area, and also Ozark and Appalachian Mountains. And let's move all of them out to this place that we're going to call Indian Territory, which is now the state of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a TP shortage? Oh. Different kind of TP, but probably. But
yeah, it's not a proud moment in our history at all.
No, and it wasn't just the fact that they were relocated against their will, because at one point there was actually it wasn't a mandatory relocation. They were given the option, and as only a few of them took the option, it became a forced thing. And during the forced relocation time period, I think it was 30%.
Here, I'll look at the stats.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how many of them ended up passing away during the relocation, but it was a sizable percentage passed away during the relocation, on top of the fact that they were just being relocated from where they had been living and called their home for a number of generations.
At least, according, and take this for what it is, it's history.com. Approximately 3,000 died out of an approximate 60,000 forced relocation. So
about 5%, give or take.
So 20, yeah. So 20th of.
It's still a sizable number and far.
Let me just take a quick look at another source just to see if they come up with something similar. Now, the funny thing is that hold on. The Cherokee are saying 4,000 of their own, so I wonder if there's a missing number in there from the previous one.
Oh, I'm willing to bet there's missing numbers, because
yeah,
what I remember from growing up,
between 4,000 and 8,000 Cherokee perished, as well as 4,000 Choctaw, a third of the entire tribe actually, and 3,500 Creek.
Yeah, I remember there being a good amount.
Yeah.
So, and yet this sort of argument of, well, these are the people who actually own the land, so it's just no. Just no.
But even then, do we want to go into a more recent example? A certain thing There's this country. It's got about 1 million people living in it. And there's this little other thing that wants to be its own country, that doesn't want to be part of the big country. And the big country wants to kind of try in any which fucking way they can to force the other fucking little country to be part of the large country. Now, I'm not going to say the names because, YouTube. But that's also something where, okay, we own this land, according to us. So therefore, you do as we say, because we can do everything here that... We can do anything we want, because fuck you. That's why.
And as a side note, not to give the president who actually signed this act into law any wiggle room out of the atrocity that it was, he's also the last president to balance the federal budget even. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
But then he didn't have nearly the amount of departments that we have now, so.
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes since then, and I would not say that many of them have been for the better.
Agreed. All right, let's move on.
I mean, for heaven's sake, Admiral Dougherty even admits that the Prime Directive doesn't apply.
Prime Directive doesn't apply. These people are not in...
Rodent, no, he didn't balance the budget. He had a surplus. He was the last president with a surplus. He gave it over to Bush in 2001. So yeah, bastards.
And here's the thing: this whole argument of it doesn't apply. They're not indigenous. Doesn't fucking matter.
I don't think the Federation was aware of the planet's existence until the Sona came to them about it.
They weren't aware of what the planet had to offer. They knew that the planet and the system were there. They just didn't know what they could gain from it.
Because I'd say if you didn't know it was there, regardless of whether the Baku showed up before the Federation was created or not, the fact that if you know of the existence of the planet but you don't maintain your claim to the planet, like actively enforce it, you lose your claim to those things. Ergo, if I'm a species that what's the best way to look at it? The best way to look at it would be that Star Trek episode where Wesley moves on with the Traveler. The demilitarized zone, they were trying to say that these planets here are no longer Federation, they are Cardassian. We're giving up our claim to them, so therefore you have to move.
Or deal with Cardassian rule, which
yeah, and the same went for the Cardassians on the Federation side. It's fortunately moved, but
let's be honest. If you have the option of living under the Federation or living under the Cardassian rule at that time before the Dominion War, it was an easy choice who had the better options.
Yeah, but the fact that none of those people were indigenous to their planets, yet they all had a claim to them because prior to the war between the Cardassians and the Federation, there were claims made and the boundaries were different. So it's.
But even then, I'm taking an in-universe thingy there. What about the occupation of Bajor? Was that just an occupation, or was it something that's actually their legal right, or when it comes to what they see as theirs? If it's their legal right compared to when it comes to what they see as theirs. Didn't in that case the Cardassians actually have full legal right to do what the fuck they wanted with the Bajorans, according to this logic?
Well, according to the way I read his logic and response, he would not have had a problem with the occupation, or should not have had a problem with the occupation.
Yeah, because that thing there, it's something that he's trying to make these claims based on but our sensibilities, say, kinda. That just doesn't quite work the way that really should in this context. The way it comes across is more not understanding the actual situation that these people are in.
Well, again, they didn't understand, because if they did, they wouldn't have had the duck blinds.
I mean,
would-
with the whole who actually owns quote unquote the planet, etc.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, even if they knew who owned the planet, the way the Federation is set up, it's again, I don't know the full inner workings here, but it seems like it's a little bit like the EU. You can go from planet to planet to planet to planet and settle wherever you want, as long as you're a citizen of a Federation planet.
That's not how it works in the EU, though.
I mean, just like general travel is what I'm getting at more, but you can go to whatever planets, and then if you can get in the EU, I'm sure you have to have some sort of job if you're gonna settle permanent in a different country, right?
But that's counter to counter rules. And that doesn't really matter that you're in the EU or not. It's one of those things that can be made easier if you're part of a member country of the EU, but it's not a requirement.
It's not a guarantee though either, is it?
No.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't know, and I'm willing to be educated.
Let's just say it like this: the EU is a fucking cesspit, and that kind of says most of it.
A bureaucracy that thinks it has power but doesn't, but kind of does, but yeah.
It's a trade union.
Yeah.
It's a trade union who thinks it's an actual legitimate state government.
Pretty much, yes, and wants to have more and more power.
Yeah, I actually agree with Rodent here.
Yeah, interstate travel and commerce here.
The Federation and travel amongst it is much more comparable to travel within the United States and going across state lines. But real quick before we get too much further away from it, for $5 Aussie, Cardassian clothing and the cookies drew me in. Keeping up with the Klingons is so overrated. Depends on the Klingon, though.
He must be talking about keeping up with Galron. It's a little hard to do that now that he's dead.
Or even easier.
I still don't think that Gowron is war class.
He wasn't.
I don't think he ever claimed to be.
What was it? His parents were teacher and a doctor?
He was from a mid-tier house. He was not from a warrior house.
Yeah. Actually, going back to the subject before we lose track of it again.
Indigenous to this planet, they were never meant to be immortal.
So why apply Prime Directive principles and protocols for a species that you know it doesn't apply to? Why treat them in the same way that they treated that group of proto-Vulcans in the episode Who Watches the Watchers? They were an actual primitive species, so the Prime Directive actually applied in that episode.
Pause
The
it.
Baku...
Here's why that happened and why that line was in there, Dave. Poor writing. Poor writing, or a character trying to justify their actions that they knew was not up to the moral code and ethical standard of the Federation.
A fucking moral code.
Well, yeah, he's an admiral. They tend to lose that when they get to that rank.
Yeah, yeah. It's there somewhere, just not the same as they had before. Which, another fucking aside from this here now, could it be that the admirals in Star Trek, or rather in the Federation, turn into such fucking assholes because they actually see what's wrong with the Federation and why it doesn't work with those kinds of people?
Yeah, it could be. They get a good look at the actual workings behind the scene, and it changes you.
Because no matter how you look at it, it seems more and more that way when you see the actions of admirals, etc., and take it into, or you take it as a, what would you do in that situation, rather than just, how does this actually jive with the values of the Federation?
I mean, like Admiral Janeway at the end of Voyager.
Yeah. The guy who wanted to make the new shield stuff and stuff like that. Where you can see the use behind it, you can see the reasoning behind it. He didn't get about it the right way, but you can see why it would actually be a good thing to have.
Admiral Cartwright's a good example too.
In Star Trek 6. Yep.
Yeah, it's one of those, if you look at the way when you have the military that can see a clear action, but the bureaucracy doesn't want to work with the military to make the direct action happen in the most easy and efficient way with the least amount of casualties. It's one of those, like, in this particular situation, if I can convince them to move to this other planet, let me convince them. But the bureaucracy is more like, yeah, but we should do X, Y, and Z first before we do A, B, and C. That's how the Admiralty thinks nowadays. Is they're like, let's just skip going to the bureaucrats and go directly to taking action, because in the end we know we're right.
And by the time that the bureaucrats have actually been looking at it and gone over it and everything like that,
The opportunity is generally passed.
yeah. And looking at the Federation, how many of their bureaucrats would you actually trust? As in proper fucking trust?
Believe it or not, I'd actually trust Section 31.
I would trust them more than I would trust a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
Because looking at many of the other ones, at least Section 31 seems more grounded in reality.
They're like, yes, there are things that are so messed up that we have to do them. We'll just do them and deal with it. You don't need to know.
And sad as it sounds, that would actually be the more ideal situation with this. It would be way better than the whole, oh yeah, we're going to send some kind of diplomat. I don't know. It'll be fine. We'll just send along some soy and brandy, show him around the flagship of the Federation. Things will be fine. And then the actual person they're talking about is, well, a voter. The bureaucrats, the people who are technically in charge there, don't have any fucking idea what they're doing. Most of the time when they start doing shit, they are so they're so far away from reality. They've just sniffed their own farts and the Federation quote-unquote agenda to the point where they don't actually know how things work in real life anymore.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes they need that rude awakening, which is where some people don't like that DS9 went towards the longer story arc of the Dominion War and everything, but it was inevitable. And at some point you knew the Federation was going to have another armed conflict with another major power because of ideological differences. So it
And
was,
they managed to do it in such a way that it actually was more realistic in the way that it was portrayed. It
yeah.
wasn't just, oh yeah, you're mean, now we're at war.
Yeah, it was definitely more thought out and more built the way we got that compared to all the references to the 4 Years' War with the Klingons and the Earth Romulan War, which, god damn it, we should have gotten that instead of fucking Discovery.
I would have loved that. But then you have to deal with Trip coming back and being being a spy in the Romulus engineering plants and stuff, you know.
That
I'm
could,
fine with that.
yeah, that could have been really fucking good. But speaking of things that could be good, we can actually go ahead and skip a little further in this to his suggestions.
All right, let's see. Where does he...
Come back a little bit. There.
Oh yeah, because it's like right after the 5-minute mark.
Yep.
Oh, a little bit further back.
Now, as he is still talking about.
Well, this is where he's talking about what he would change in.
Well, this bit, what he would change is he would essentially get rid of the whole issue with the Baku. Get rid of the Sona, get rid of the backstory with the Baku.
Yeah, it's get rid of the backstory of the Baku and Sona, the thing, but he would also, this is what I was looking for, actually make the Baku primitive people.
No advanced technologies or knowledge of warp drive. I would also have made it so that the planet belongs to them. It's where they originated from. With all of these foundational backstory issues resolved, the Federation duck blind, the invisible isolation suits, and giant cloaked holoship all make perfect sense. Now, as I say, I would make it so that the opening scene where Data goes berserk and exposes the duck blind to the Baku plays basically exactly as it does in the original film. It's a strong opening and it works well. But as soon as this scene ends, I would have cut to the Enterprise leading a fleet of damaged Federation ships. Picard's log entry states that after a major battle with the Dominion, they're on their way for repairs and a debriefing at Deep Space Nine.
So, and this bit, from this point on of his suggested changes, couple minor tweaks, and I'm completely on board with it.
Oh yeah, I think it would have been nice to have. This would have been a much better movie to end the Next Generation series, and then bring in some DS9 style movies. Maybe do a longer Dominion War battle, like an actual go to a battle site, so to speak, between the Dominion and the Federation, and all of that.
Have more of a campaigning type stuff instead of what we got in season 7.
Yeah. And then after that, at the end of season 7, you could go into a DS9,
picking up the pieces.
Yeah, picking up the pieces on Bajor. The you could go to following on what happens after Cisco leaves. So there was a better way to do this and actually give DS9 their spot. You could have also started fiddling in some Voyager cast movies. I don't know how exactly, but you could maybe make some more plausible leaps into how far they've gone from point A to point B in the Delta Quadrant without it having to be Kess coming along and magically throwing them 10,000 light years.
Yeah, let's hit play.
This would have been much better. At least this way, the film would tie directly into the current events taking place in the Alpha Quadrant, i.e. the Dominion War, which was sadly only mentioned in passing in the film. So instead of having that pointless and unfunny scene on the Enterprise where Picard meets those aliens we have never seen before and will never see again, there could have been a scene in the Deep Space Nine wardroom where the Enterprise crew and a few members of the Deep Space Nine cast discuss where the most recent battle with the Dominion went wrong and assess how badly the war is going for the Federation. The mood could be tense and perhaps even heated, and this could have played into one of the central themes of the film, which I'll get to in a moment. Either way, the fans would have really appreciated this DS9 TNG crossover. Geordi would enter the room and inform Captain Picard that he's received a request from Admiral Dougherty in Sector 441 that data has malfunctioned and that they require his schematics. Just like in the original film, Picard is confused, he speaks to the Admiral, and the conversation goes pretty much as we saw it in the film. But this time, when Picard decides to defy Admiral Dougherty and go to the Baku planet, he requests permission from Captain Sisko if he can borrow Commander Worf, as Worf has experience with dealing with the malfunctioning data from his past on the Enterprise D.
Yes, that is a much better tie-in and justification for Worf being there.
I don't know, the beadwork though, man, the beadwork.
You could still have that happen, but have it take place while they're at DS9 instead of just randomly en route somewhere on the Enterprise. So you could still have that fun scene, but having that scene and that interaction would more easily give reason for Worf to be there, but also you gotta make O'Brien suffer.
Have him tag along too?
Yes.
We need a really good transporter chief. But the station will fall apart without me. Sister's like, yeah, go be transporter chief. No, I agree. There was so much more they could have done with this to tie it in with Deep Space Nine. I understand why they're trying to keep them separate story arcs, but
that was such a major thing going on.
Exactly. It's not like it was, they were trying to search for Voyager's last known whereabouts, major but not that major of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That the Enterprise wouldn't actually have to be there. But being the flagship, being in the battle, like being in the Battle of Wolf 359 or the battle at Sector 001, the flagship should be there, and it should be used in the Dominion War too.
And for captains who disobey orders, I think it's safe to say that Picard has disobeyed more orders than Kirk.
Yeah, so I would probably venture to say Sisko's done more egregious ethical breaks than Kirk or Picard.
But are they really that egregious when you look at the outcome of them?
Yeah, like a lot of people point to that one when he was chasing down Eddington, and that one, while it initially seemed to be rather harsh, the planets he affected, what he used just made them uninhabitable for one species, but not the other, and vice versa. So you have that. It kind of works out in the balance in the end. But, okay, so I think Leon should take this question from Sean Carroll. Serious question. Why does O'Brien suffer so much? Shouldn't the guy at least get a break once?
Because he deserves the suffering. He can't exist without the suffering. Everything happening to O'Brien is only there to enhance his suffering. Every little thing in his life, even the good things, are just there to make the suffering more intense.
And for those who really want a good parallel and comparison, O'Brien is Star Trek's version of Jesus. He takes all the suffering so everyone else can prosper.
Hold on. I hate to use it, but Laurie wrote the Lore Reloaded had an actual good good meme about it, and I think it explains why he suffers so much. Let me do this.
He's not wrong.
Well, he isn't really racist, though.
He's prejudiced more than
Yeah, but that's xenophobia.
But it's only really against the Cardassians.
Yep.
Not really against the Cardassians either, really, when you look at it. He doesn't have that prejudice, or rather, he isn't just prejudiced. He isn't like that without reason.
No,
I
yeah.
mean, when you've been swarmed by spoonheads a couple of hundred times, you might get to that point too.
What the fuck am I getting into on Twitter right now?
Well, I mean, there are some people who just like to push buttons.
Yes, there are. So, speaking of pushing buttons,
Something like that. Cisco agrees, and the Enterprise E crew head off to the Briar Patch. This entire scene at Deep Space Nine would have helped to add some more background to where the Enterprise E was during the Dominion War, as well as giving us a satisfying reason for Worf actually being in the movie, because in the actual film, he just suddenly appears on the Enterprise without any real explanation. The rest of the subplot narratives would play in a similar way. Riker and Troy could still get back together.
Hang on, pause.
Picard and Anish could still have...
Wasn't Worf there because he was essentially hitching a ride?
yeah, I believe that their original assignment where they were supposed to go, which is in the opposite direction of the Briar Patch, would take them past Deep Space Nine.
Which would give them a reason to stop in and drop off Worf. So yeah, it's a weak reason. It was a really simple explanation to kind of just throw in there and justify why he was there. But you can't say he just showed up and there was no reason given.
Yeah. Then he hasn't met Gilbert and Sullivan yet either, so.
their romance, etc. In fact, this would actually help to make the entire plot much more of a personal story for Picard. So let's imagine that the Federation wants
Hold
to
up.
control the planet.
How
Yeah.
I forgot about that line. It was already a personal story for Picard, not just because of his feelings for Anaj, but also because, hey, this is the same fucked up shit that the Federation is telling me to do that a cadet actually reminded me of is rather fucked up to do a couple of years ago.
Oh my.
Tell me how you really feel, Jared.
To be honest, though, that one cadet just pissed the fuck off, and you didn't really have to bother with it for a while again.
Although he does show up at the beginning of the next movie because, hey,
Well,
need
no
a
one
seat
likes him
filler.
anyway. No one still likes him.
Now, is it because they don't like Wesley or they don't like Will Wheaton?
No, they don't
Yes.
They don't like Gene Roddenberry creating a character for him and not them. Do you remember? Have you ever seen that scene from that one con that he's there? The people are heckling him about Wesley, and he's like, "Shut up! I didn't make him for you. I made him for me."
Yeah. Yeah, because it is essentially a de facto adopted son type.
Yeah.
Not because they
Why
want to
would
make
you
some
want to
new
adopt that?
Did you look at the mother around that time?
Still.
medical science, but because they believe it would be of significant strategic value in their fight against the Dominion. In my version of the film, the Baku planet has only recently been discovered by accident, concealed within this Briar Patch Nebula. The reason the Federation are so determined to gain control of the planet and annex it within the Federation as soon as possible is because, firstly, it's pretty close to the Cardassian border, and of course the Cardassians are allies with the Dominion. The Federation want to remove the Baku not because they want to turn the metaphasic radiation into new medicine to extend life, but instead because they've discovered that the radiation in the rings around the planet can be extracted and refined into a highly potent form that can be used for making weapons.
Just pause it there for a little bit, yeah. They do have weapons already. They have extremely fucking potent weapons. They have weapons that could, well, quite literally genocide the entirety of the Cardassian race, or species rather. But they don't use them. So, what exactly would this be that makes it so much more of a better weapon that wouldn't at the same time break those things?
Because this radiation is supposed to be a bigger yield than the standard photon and quantum torpedoes.
But here's
But they... Go on.
the radiation had issues against organic material, fleshy, soft, squishy material. The flesh is weak, but it wouldn't do anything against a ship. And most of the combat was ship to ship.
It's not just that either, though. Because if you look at it, okay, when you look at the way that their weapons work, what was it that they did in order to completely fuck over several different planets? Well, the mutagenic weapons, or flooding the planets with something that the Cardassians couldn't actually survive. They have the weapons. They have highly effective weapons. They just essentially nerf themselves in order to not actually use those kinds of things. Now, I could understand if it's something like, okay, that this one can, say for example, be used to actually stun the crews of different vessels, etc. This can be used as an ionizing field, so you can just disable the shields and the ships without having to, outright fucking destroy them. But a more effective weapon otherwise is not really needed in this way.
Yeah.
Sometimes Dave has good ideas, but I can see where he's coming from with this one, but yet no. I wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah,
It's like saying, we're being invaded by aliens. Instead of nuking the fuck out of them, we decide to try to find a slightly more dense material to put on the tips of our rifle rounds.
Or we could just sneeze on them.
Well, that works. It's worked before. The chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, they say.
My whole thought process on the whole using the radiation for a weapon is that it kind of goes against everything that the Federation stands for to begin with. You could be using this as a situation where it's still being used for medicinal purposes, but it could be done. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the healing properties in Star Wars for the non-Force users. It used to be Kolto, but now it's Bacta. That's what could be used here instead of the radiation. Instead of using the traditional medicines via hypospray, you get a dose of the radiation in a hypospray form. You know,
Yeah, and I can buy that. Just making
it-
sure that you have people out of commission for a way shorter time than otherwise.
exactly. But then again, it's weapons are better.
Well, around the time of this, the appeal for them trying to weaponize it does kind of make sense because they are in the middle of a massive armed conflict that for the bulk of it, they're losing.
Yeah.
So
I get it. I'm not saying it's not a reasonable. I'm not saying it's a reasonable or an unreasonable plot device for this movie setup. And it does make sense to come up with a different weapon. But the whole use for medical reasons is a very noble thing that you could be doing in the middle of the war as well.
And
Yeah.
it's something where the Federation would more likely, unless it's a rogue admiral, to actually try to aim for that. I don't know.
no, I pretty much got the gist of the changes that you'd make at this point, which I have to say, the major changes I don't disagree with. Tie it in with the Dominion War, tie it in with DS9. That would have been. I honestly expected that after First Contact for them to do something like that, and was disappointed when all we got was just Worf randomly being there again. But hindsight is always going to give you a better view of the situation and what you can and can't do after seeing what's offered. However, Star Trek, especially TNG and TOS, were huge about the episodic nature of morality tales and examining the human experience through the eyes of an advanced humanity dealing with other species. How is Insurrection different from that modality of storytelling? I argue and contend that it's not. And that Dave was just
Nitpicking?
laughably wrong.
All right. So the time frame of this movie in correlation with Deep Space Nine is post Jadzia dying. You could have also had brought why am I blanking on her name now? Ezri. You could have brought Ezri along and you could have used that to grow at least the understanding between Worf and Ezri about their past relationship. And not make it so, because it was uncomfortable with Ezri and Worf in some of the scenes. And it was meant to be. I get that.
Or how about, well, now because this took place during, it kind of overlapped with part of season 7, so the idea of Ezri hitching a ride on the Enterprise wouldn't have worked either, because she dropped in on Ben when he was in New Orleans before they left Earth at the beginning of season 7.
Well, this is like episode timeline.
Mm-hmm.
This movie came out right in between Covenant, where Kira is kidnapped and taken to Empok Nor. And then the episode where Nog is spending a crap ton of time on the holosuite.
Recovering from that. So yeah, you're a good chunk into season 7, so that's where I just don't know what justification they would have to bring Ezri along too. Like, you could understand Miles because of the engineering background. You can understand Worf because of just
tactical and dealing with data.
Yep. But Ezri would be a stretch.
It would be a stretch, but I'm thinking of, instead of using...
It would have helped develop that relationship more.
What I was trying to get to is, on the planet, after Picard and all of them leave in the captain's yacht to go down to the planet, you could have kept Troy up on the Enterprise with Riker. And you could have had Ezri down there, 2 psychologists,
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been you would have gotten the best of both worlds there if Ezri was there, just as an alternative to what he's proposed. There, you could expand, like I said, you could expand upon Worf's relationship, and that would give them time to come to terms with it. Not necessarily do they come together and rekindle, but they at least come together and understand, okay, this is where we are, and then for the rest of the season, they're not so combative with each other in silence, so to speak.
Yeah, they get more of the progression earlier on and actually have the story fit.
Yeah. But again, hindsight being 2020, we as writers, air quotes there, we can see where it lines up, where the release lines up, and make that work. Whereas the writers back then, one group's writing a movie, one group's writing a TV show. Do you really want them to mix?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that I guess people in the same group as Dave really forget that TNG, DS9, and Voyager, they had separate writing rooms. They were not a shared experience on the writing side of it. The only overlap that they had was actually at the executive producer level, just making sure, yep, you're staying in the vein of Star Trek, okay. It was very high level stuff, not day-to-day nitty-gritty type of those details were being managed by the only crossover from the creative side.
Well, this being said, though, do we have really a lot more to actually go with the movie?
Not really.
No, because again, most of Jared and my arguments for it are against his premises for why the changes need to be made. Because he's basically conflating what happens in the movie with, oh, well, since you own the planet, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. And it's just like, no.
They didn't own the planet.
The whole time I sat here and watched this video twice and then was working on the third one, I was thinking of that old what was it, a Geico commercial where it's the old ladies sitting in the room and they're like,
I'm gonna post it on my wall.
Puts it up on. I like that. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. That's what was going through my mind.
Yeah, same with me on that, because that initial bit is like, whoa, wait, you're saying what? Oh no. Oh no. As a matter of fact, hang on, let me find it.
Your comment?
Because so I sent the link in our chat and said, and Leon asked, is this going to be retarded? To which I said, it's Dave Cullen. Generally, he's a good one. Then I start watching it. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, this'll be a fun one.
And then, to quote Brian Blissett, no one's going to say that we are actually saying these things. Are you retarded?
Yeah.
And then, this week, Kanar with Damar happened. But we do have one more really important thing now to point out. That really needs to be shown.
You're not
It needs to be ridiculed.
Are you talking about that tweet?
Yes.
I'm getting it pulled up right now. Glad I haven't eaten yet.
I was going to say, to the audience out there, I hope your stomach is settled, because
It won't be after this.
apparently this is what the Ferengi look like now.
I'm assuming this is for Discovery.
Yeah.
Well, if it's for Discovery, it definitely looks like the Ferengis contracted an STD.
I do not get the pigmentation of the Ferengi here. They live on Ferengi now, which, unless it's, changed there too, it's raining there all the time. All the fucking time. There's no sun shining through. There's no UV radiation. And as far as we've seen so far, the Ferengi skin is at least similar to ours enough that would actually affect them too. If you look at them in TNG and what's it called? DS9,
Yeah.
they can at most look slightly tanned. And this one here now, I don't fucking know. Looks more like one of the Nosferatu from fucking Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah. Like, when I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw this, I was at first like, what the hell is... Oh, no. Don't tell me. And I start reading through the replies. It's like, oh, that is supposed to be the Ferengi. Oh.
It hurts. It just hurts.
Let's just find one of these people here, though, or one of the characters from Vampire the Masquerade, just for comparison.
All right.
There we have the thingy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Still a little darker than them, but I see the point.
You know, maybe someone was playing the game and got inspired.
Yeah, but everything here just looks so fucking wrong. Looking at something like the next one too, and sure this is in shadow and all that kind of shit. It looks more like that than a fucking Ferengi. Why couldn't they just get the Ferengi right? They fucked up the Klingon. They fucked up the Ferengi. I don't know what else they've been fucking up except for the entire fucking franchise that they've been having control over.
The Vulcans with beards?
The Andorians, the Vulcans, they have tweaked every species except human in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, they've tweaked the humans with the cybernetics pieces.
I think that you can kind of just cut out there after they have tweaked.
That too.
Because it just looks. I don't even know what the fuck it looks like. It doesn't look like a Ferengi. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. Is it supposed to be a Ferengi? Or is it small motherfucker?
It is what it is.
Everything I've been able to find so far, now granted, I only found this an hour and a half ago, and everything is pointing towards it supposed to be their version of the Ferengi a few hundred years in the future. You know what? That's what it is. It is the descendant of Quark and Grilka. And I'm going to hate it if that's the story that they actually go with.
Would it surprise at this point?
No.
I mean, look even at the makeup there. It looks like they made a mask and slapped that fucking mask on top of this face. It doesn't look like prosthetics per se. It looks like a really fucking poorly made Halloween mask.
Well, we are only 3 weeks and a day away from Halloween.
Do they have to put it in there too? Do they have to do it?
It's looking
This is
that
kind
way.
of like deep fried butter. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. I think I'm going to need to find something for some brain bleach before switching over to part 2 of tonight's festivities.
Here you go. Bleach your brain off of this.
Oh, fuck.
I feel like critique here is a really Weasley word.
Yes.
They haven't criticized, though.
No, they haven't, and that's the problem. What they're doing is they're attacking. They're not criticizing. There's a big difference between the two.
I don't really expect a lot more though. It's just nice not to have to deal with these fucking kinds of people. They can just go back to where they came from.
I can agree with that sentiment. And there was something else that was... Oh yeah, no. I think we'll talk about that one next week.
Oh, the one that you posted later.
Yeah, the follow-up one where...
Good, because I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I saw 30 minutes. I was like, nope, not happening tonight.
So, little bit of a heads up. We are going to warn you. So, next weekend, we are not going to be on air because I get to work Saturday and Sunday. So, yay. But the week after, so we are looking at... Excuse me.
23rd.
The 23rd. The topic will actually be a bit of an analysis of the New Republic in the Star Wars franchise and why it failed in the epic fashion that it did, aside from just shitty writing.
You mean besides one of the core planets being blown up?
Oh, not just one. There were a number of things that I learned in watching that video that were like, oh yeah, this was gonna fail from the beginning. There are fundamental issues there.
Oh, I'm aware. I haven't watched this, but I bet you I could probably guess what most of them are.
Yeah.
But if you want to know, you'll have to wait till the 23rd.
Yep. So when it comes to that subject, we will see you in 2 weeks for the other shenanigans and depravity. We'll see you all in about 45 minutes.
Ring my bell to be a special subscriber.